Hi, Alex here from Fatto a Mano, made by hand. Just got a new project and I wanted to keep a diary of it. It's something that was commissioned by my lady's sister and brother-in-law, and is a console table. They saw one I made, they liked it, so they asked me if I could do one for them. So I'm just going to get some materials. I intend to use character oak if possible. I generally try to minimize the impact on the environment, both on sourcing materials and also the material I'm using. This to me is actually quite important, so I try to minimize anything that is expandable. So for example, I prefer to use blades. So for example, planes and chisel and things like that. I am not going to use sandpaper, and I want to I set myself to use only hand tools. Obviously, if something is rough sawn and has already been sawn, I'll do that. So I just need to find the right type of wood and with the right shape. Also, minimizing the waste for me is important, not to chop up things unnecessarily. So for example, I had another piece of wood but is way too long and the waste will actually be too much for me, so I'm just waiting for the right part. This project is going to be filmed as a diary, so do not worry, you don't have to subscribe, you don't have to like it. Is just something more for me and for them, and hopefully if there is anything that I do sharing with you that you can get some better knowledge or different knowledge, that is great. But I'm not pretending to teach anyone, and I'm just showing basically what I'm doing. Very modest, because I only started a couple of years ago in woodwork, and to me is a constant learning curve. I'm always trying to do things the best I can of my abilities, but also to keep learning from some of the great woodworking schools, and you know, YouTube channels are out there. But also I have a few friends that work within, you know, the wood carpentry and joinery industry, and a constant source of inspiration for me. So now I have two of these boards plus the leg. I may take a few little shots so you can see what I'm doing, and after I square them up, let's get on with it, and welcome to my diary. Oh, lovely wood. Absolutely lovely. That's beautiful. Cool. Just wanted to show you, let me get a stick here. That is actually quite lovely. Just want to see. This section I need is actually quite a bit shorter. You can actually see that I will need probably, I'll cut this off. I just was trying to join them much bigger, so I have a better reference point. So just at times, you know, things go left and right and a little bit depending upon the shape of the wood. So yeah. Now, if you're wondering, despite this is not flat yet, why have we used the winding stick, is because in the past I found that if the board is quite substantially twisted, the gap in the middle doesn't really matter. So I try to remove the twist first and then plane it same height all over. So as you can see here, for example, that point is quite high, but at the same time the winding stick doesn't sit flat, so I do not know if it's actually twisted or if there is a bump in the middle or both. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to tackle that corner until I don't see a gap there anymore. See, now is much better. Not sure if you can see from the back, but at least it sits a bit more flat. This one, yeah, there's still a gap, quite a substantial gap here. So I'm going to tackle this corner. Yep. Okay, we're getting there, I think. Let's see there. Yeah. A straight edge, so I took a piece of aluminium massively high in the middle. So, as you can see, pivots there, and pivots here. This is obviously not the final size. As I said, I try to keep it quite long, so then once it's cut to size, if the corners are not quite right, as it is taken to measure, then it doesn't really. No, actually, still. Cool. I think we're quite close. I just need to smooth it out. I absolutely love this piece. As you can see, there are lots of medullary rings or medullary marks. I don't know exactly what they're called. Not sure if you can see them, but these little spots, I'm trying to get the light across, and I thought that was actually a sign of weakness, and I couldn't be any further from the truth. I think Paul Seller mentions in one of his videos, and he actually goes through and I did a bit of research. So yeah, that's really happy with that. The other bit that I have already done, kind of flattened, I absolutely adore. I'm not sure if you can see, there are a couple of knots. They're absolutely stunning. This is one, and that's the other one. So I need to ring Jules' sister and actually see if they want it as a top either side, or if they want this to be the shelf, if they want the shelf at all. So anyhow, I'll keep working and I'll catch up with you in a little bit.
Anti-racism protests have been held in London, marched to Parliament before a rally in Trafalgar Square. In Glasgow, hundreds gathered as an anti-racism protest in the city centre, despite appeals by police for people to stay away because of social distancing rules. There have been no reports of any major disturbances. A diver has reached the bottom of the deepest ocean trench 60 years after his father became the first person to achieve the feat. Don Walsh's son Kelly is only the 12th diver to make it to the floor of the Mariana Trench, which is nearly 7 miles below sea level. Six news at sport, and there was a nail-biting end to Brighton's match against Arsenal on the...
In about 15-20 minutes time. Feel free to get your glad rags on. Feel free to put some makeup on first. Who's raving and working in the stockroom, packing everybody's online orders. Wow! Well, while you're packing, keep you motivated. Our self-certified selection includes this.
So I have taken the board. This is going to be the top shelf of the console table, and I've cut just little samples of that will be the leg that will come through the mortise. So in a way, this will be the top of the tenon from the actual leg, and I'm trying to place it. I have a limit. This is actually the only measurement I have a limit for, which is about 65 centimeters, definitely not over 65. So I'm trying to place this to see how it would fit. And the reason being is because I have this beautiful knot which I would like to fill and basically make a feature of it. I really love this grain here. You know, one of those things that you look at it and you said that's going to be a bugger to plane, and it was, definitely was. I'm really happy with the knot. Personally, I think it's beautiful. I just really love it. So what I need to do now is looking where to place the legs. Now I need to address the legs. I got this leftover piece of character oak, still pretty rough. I draw a midline, not sure if you can see, straight in the center. Well, being a midline, it will be in the center. Obviously need to square it up because it's nowhere near. So flattening one surface, finding one side, and then cut it. So let's get on with it. So I have now sized up, so this will be pretty much the final size of the top shelf, and I personally think that the knot came out really beautiful. I scraped it because you've got grains here going everywhere, so this way is going this way and then it's changing, twisting, going side. So basically in whichever direction you're playing it is at some point it will be a nightmare. So I was playing around with the joinery of the legs, and the one I've done before had a through mortise and tenon with a little raise of the leg compared to the actual top. So it would look something like this once I have changed the legs. Not sure if you can actually see it. And trying to find a happy medium, I come out with this, which is a horizontal blind mortise and tenon. And this is just a test piece. You can see here the shape of the tenon. It's been interesting to cut these because obviously you can't cut the sides very well, so this way. Mortise onto the leg, you can see it.
Hospital for the delivery of little baby girls today. Much love to Keith as well. Hello to Olivia, age 11. Says
Relief cut. Pencil. I won't be able to mark the back, but this provides me with decent guidance on that. So now I can just go straight across it on this side. So I'm going to leave a little bit abundant just in case. You can always pare it down nicely. Now, interesting, the grain is going that way, so it won't be a problem for this one. But when I cut this one through with the chisel, that will try to dig in. So I need to be careful, because otherwise the whole leg is going to sit, wanting to sit at an angle, unless it butts up with this one very well. So anyhow, let's wait and see. So that's that. That's neat. So slightly bit on the fat side, and now is from underneath, as that's the top. So I can already feel that the marking knife is wanting to go up because of the grain orientation. That's it. Yeah, that's the depth of the mortise. Not how I like to measure stuff, but I can't get that in. That's it. my test, with the saw, despite I was careful, I just nicked the edges, so I just really did not want to do that. Interesting about this, when I was flattening this bit, this is character oak and it's very dry and is renowned to split really easily. I just left it a little bit proud in here. However, as per the grain of dentation, I couldn't really pare it this way because it would have dug into the actual grain. So I had to basically come from the back and keep changing. So that bit is surely is gonna come off. Hopefully, that's the face side. So hopefully, when I put the leg in, should be all nice and tight. And I just need to round this bit. That's it. That's flat. So cross side first. Actually, yeah, it doesn't really matter. One. I have been cutting the tenons in two main ways. So, for example, in this one here, where the orientation of the grain is quite parallel, then I use a chisel, so I mark up the line quite thick, so it provides as a guidance. I cut the back, and then with a flush saw or any tenon saw, obviously the space in here is quite limited, so if I use like a normal saw, I can't go quite further in enough, so I started with it at an angle, and then I use the flush cut saw to go basically that little bit, go in, and then with the chisel I put it up here and then obviously cut through. Now, where the grain is going towards the inside of the actual tenon, if I would use a chisel here and not being very careful, this will actually go below the line. Despite I start up here, a couple of times went right there at the end. So I'm actually going to use the flush saw to provide some relief cuts in here and here, so minimizes the chances that if a big chunk will come off, if this part of the top of the cheek will come off, it will not be entering and going below the line. So just transferring the line across. Actually face side, I'll go with this way. That's it. While I'm at it, I've also transferred these, so butt up my knife against that wall. That's it. You can see just a tiny little groove in there, so neat. That's neat. All the mortices are cut, all the legs have been done. So I've used my hand-operated cranked pillar drill, and then obviously refined that with chisel, and very happy with how they come out. Really happy. I've used like a test tenon used as a reference guide, and worked really well. Okay, so relieved a little bit of material in here, and mainly from here. That's the one. So because this is obviously less, there is less material here, is going to push it further into the actual joint there. So I can either, it's a bit of a tight fit. Yeah, okay, so what I'd like to do, see where he's actually marking. Okay, so I still love to perhaps not to take away too much from here, so I just have a little shave and see. Okay, so now marking line, that's a millimeter out. I'm going to try to remove 0.5 millimeter and see what that is going to take me. Now I don't want to undercut right in the center. If I can, I just try to cut it flush. I just prefer it that way. That's it. Now I'm just going to extend this line, but this time I'm just going to wiggle the chisel right to the tenon. Really happy with this. And so when I cut the actual side in here, I follow the line, and I then discovered that my marking gouge was actually loose, so unfortunately moved a bit and is absolutely parallel to the actual leg, but there is a little gap. As you can see here, is probably about 2/3 of a millimeter, 3/4 of a millimeter. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut a shim and look at the orientation of the wood and basically glue a shim here. This is the bottom shelf, so probably not visible, but I'm not happy in leaving that gap, especially when the one underneath is so neat, and you know, all the others are pretty neat compared to this one. So note to self, just always make sure that the marking gouge is set correctly and not loose. So this is the shim that I cut, reasonably even, and just spreading the glue. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually keep it in place with the leg itself. Is obviously going to be a tight fit, but that's exactly the purpose, so it can actually squeeze against that and be nice and solid. Just placing the leg back in place and making sure I clean any excess, because obviously I want to remove it. So I'm just cleaning the excess squeeze out from the actual seating, and leave it there to glue. And this is the final result with the leg in. So I just use a tiny little bit of glue and sawdust to fill the gaps, and I'm pretty happy with it. I think it's going to be absolutely perfectly fine. So same procedure for the legs, as far as coat of oil, burnishing with some steel wool. This is a mix of medium and fine. Then using the wax or burnishing with shavings, and then the wax to let it sit there, and then I'll buff it up once I finished the glue up. Needless to say, I've marked here the joint where the tenon is going to be. So as far as the oil, I want to go just there so the glue doesn't stick, but not actually at the side of the joint. So, and obviously same thing on the side, because otherwise if there is glue, then it won't actually glue up as well. Just getting out a small repair, as the thin strip here came off during polishing, so managed to cut a flat surface here, and then cut a piece off, which was the original leg, so just one corner, so flat against flat, and I just clamped it. So now I'm just cleaning it up. Already took the most of it off already. Now just tiny little shave to make it flat there, and now I just need to polish it again. Here we go. So I'm using a piece of steel wool impregnated with oil and wax. I'm just trying to discolor it to make it blend in. I'm going both with the grain first and then across the grain. Yeah. That's quite red for oak, so I'm going to go slightly mix between these two. And then that one. And then back on this one. Now that's good. Now polishing it off. Then that bit, it's nice, and the chamfer, and then polishing it off. That's just wax, beeswax that is. Now I just need to burnish it all with wood chips. So in these there are a total of 4 coats, oil, then oil and steel wool, and then 2 coats of wax, and I burnish it in between. That gives to me a very, very natural feeling that I absolutely love passing the hand on it. So it's not tacky, doesn't stick, it just glides, really lovely, but also maintains that lucidity and brightness of the oak. Maybe also time for the Alfie Shine. That would be the very last coat. So this is the one I normally keep as just the very last coat. Here we are. This project has been lots of fun, and I really enjoyed the simplicity of the furniture. Actually looked. I do always have an attraction for things that look very simple, and yet quite a lot of work has gone into it, and that has been revealed in joinery, in the finishing, and the measuring, and the proportions. So hope you enjoyed too, and look forward to see you in my next project. Ciao, ciao.